I'm Kuparan Viswanathan from Malaysia. I've worked on small-scale fisheries for the last 30 years and mostly in the South Asian region. And we have a important contribution of this small-scale fisheries to the livelihoods of almost 100 million people. And fish is an important part of the diet. I mean, almost 30 kilograms of fish is consumed per capita by people in South Asia. And a lot of people depend on these resources, not only for food, but also for livelihood, for even a face, for how they work and employment. And therefore, these resources are extremely important, and their role in these resources has to be somewhat promoted or protected in the long term for the well-being of quite a significant number of people. Given the importance of small-scale fisheries and the significant problems the small-scale fisheries face, such as large numbers of people depend on this, the poverty levels of people, the increasing dependence of young and women on those fisheries, and also the need to conserve these fisheries for the long term, brings about real issues of how do you manage such a complex ecosystem and human environment in which these resources are found. There is a strong need to develop some guidelines as to how these resources can be managed, and also people can understand what's actually happening within these resources. And so we are now developing guidelines as to how these fisheries can be managed. And FAO is involved in this process of developing these guidelines through a strong consultative process, right from the stakeholders at the ground level to the highest level possible from governments and international agencies. And it's hoped that these guidelines will be a major contribution towards helping to manage the resources for the well-being of those large numbers of people who depend on these resources.
My name is Svein Jentoft. I'm a professor at the Norwegian College of Fisheries Science in northern Norway, part of University of Tromsø. My interest has for many years been on the small-scale fisheries of the north. Although it is true that the majority of small-scale fishers are in the south, that it is still so that many people in the north draw their livelihoods from fishing at a very small scale, and they are totally dependent on the opportunity and the access that they have to fisheries resources. They are dependent themselves, and their communities are dependent on the fact that they have this access. They are also under pressure for various reasons that often comes with development. So it is important that their issues and concerns, which largely overlap with the issues and concerns of small-scale fisheries in the south, are taken into consideration. These guidelines now being developed for the small-scale fisheries also have applications for the north. They address issues and policies that can potentially also make a big difference for small-scale fisheries in the north. It is important that fishers in these regions of the world are not forgotten, that the principles can also apply to them.
Small-scale fisheries, for us, we consider them too big to ignore. That is actually the term that we have been using and putting that in our research program. It's called Global Partnership for Small-Scale Fisheries Research. What we are trying to do is to address the issues that are important to small-scale fisheries and trying to elevate the profile of this sector. So these guidelines works very nicely with what we are trying to do, which is to generate a network of researchers, disseminate information, and trying to do in-depth understanding of what's going on in this study, in this important sector. So we're very happy to see that FAO is taking initiative to develop these guidelines, and with our research network, we would be very much happily to endorse it and trying to promote it and use it to achieve our common goals.
In the Caribbean, most of the countries are small island developing states, all of which have small-scale fisheries, which comprise a very important part of the culture and economy. Well, in the Caribbean, the countries have recently developed a common fisheries policy And these guidelines, I'm sure, will be very important in strengthening that policy, but also in assisting the network of fisherfolk organizations which exist in the Caribbean to further their civil society role in governance and bond with the guidelines and bond with the governments that are implementing the guidelines to form a stronger livelihood for the industry.
Tanzania is blessed with a number of fishing water bodies. In the Eastern Africa, we have Lakes Victoria, we have Lake Tanganyika, and we have Lake Nyasa, and numerous rivers and dams within the inland. And this is also to say that we also have the Indian Ocean. In all of these water bodies or fishing bodies, those who actually do the fishing there are mostly small-scale fishers. In Tanzania, where, for instance, in Lake Victoria and Lake Tanganyika, we don't allow trawling or in the lakes. It means those who remain there are small-scale fishers using canoes and boats, which are less than 10 meters long, and they only use paddles and sails to go to their fishing areas. So mostly the number of small-scale fishers in Tanzania exceeds in great numbers those who are in the industrial area. And industrial fishing is only found mainly in the Indian Ocean and in the offshore. Yeah. So small-scale fishing is part of the life of fisheries, and it is what mostly constitutes fishing in Tanzania. I think this is a very important instrument for the development of small-scale fisheries in Tanzania. As I have just pointed out, that the fisheries in Tanzania is mainly small-scale in nature, and the contribution of this sector in the Tanzanian economy, although it is recognized, and we have a number of activities taking place within this sector, but it is not very well appreciated in terms of budget allocations, in terms of development priorities. There are certain areas that receive a lot of priority, which the small-scale fisheries would have also received equal priority as those areas. But this instrument that we're working on here is going to lift the small-scale fishing as an important part of what should be considered as beneficial, not from an economic sense, but also from a social sense. And it's going to even help not only the governments, but also the small-scale fishers themselves to appreciate that at least once in life something is happening that recognizes their contribution to the activities that they are involved in. So it's going to be a very important and very useful instrument, and I'm happy to be part of the process in producing this.